hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, January 16th, 2018. Duane, a lot of news happened since we last spoke on Friday. Let's start by Friday night itself. In all my years of covering soccer and covering other sports and news outlet and social media, when's the right time to make a big announcement to make sure people care for it? It's like at midnight, at like at 12:31 a.m. On a random January Friday night.
Yeah, it was 12:38 a.m. when I saw the news. Easter, in fairness, Landon Donovan, who we're talking about, does live on the West Coast, and the club he's going to is a Western Mexican club, Leon. Yeah, a pretty weird time to make an announcement of that significance Friday night at all. Even
pretty weird announcement. Period. Like when I was just looking at this, you and I were texting. Like, so, is it January or is it April's 1st? April Fool's? Is it April 1st? Did I miss a few months?
Yeah, look, pretty baffling. Look, when I first came out, like I saw it, and normally I would have just instinctively retweeted news of that magnitude without even thinking about it. But in this particular case, I stepped back and went, "Is this real?" It legitimately, I wondered whether it might be a hoax, that there might be they're playing an elaborate prank. It was a marketing something. I'm still not convinced there's not something.
Still could be
not
marketing.
Purely.
It kind of is. The one thing that we keep hearing, and I don't really speak Spanish. Me comprende un poquito, en una cerveza, por favor, but it's about it. So when I keep
Dos cerveza, por favor.
Exactly, one for each hand, and that's what people tell me when I go down south is dos, because dos acero and dos cerveza is a lot better than one. So when people are talking about Landon Donovan, and the words that are coming out of Landon Donovan's mouth is, I don't believe in walls. I don't agree with what our president is doing, and I think we should have a better relationship with Mexico and its people. That's what I get. So does that explain why he's coming out of retirement for a second time, this time to play with a club that he never played with and a league that he never played with in a part of the world, a part of the soccer world, especially where he had no ties prior to this? I'm if you would have come out of retirement to go play a half a season with Everton and to get Sam Allardyce a few points, I would have all right, I get it. But Leon, I don't. I still don't.
The only thing I can think of again, and he did make the statement, and let me just read it. Tom Marshall, the Mexican soccer writer that most people know, he's been a guest on this show before, did translate what Donovan said in Spanish. So I'm going to read you his Instagram post, essentially translating Donovan's words. I think that this speaks a little bit to what his motivations might be. And I want to be careful by suggesting that I'm not saying that 100% this is it, but it seems like it might be a bit of a statement by Landon Donovan. It's something that he wants to do symbolically as much as anything else. This is Landon Donovan's words as translated by Tom Marshall. I don't like what our president has done in relations between Mexico and the United States. I don't like it at all. I was born in Southern California. I grew up talking and playing with Mexicans, and it's part of my soul. And that's why I don't like what he says about Mexico. I know Mexican people are very kind people. Like I said on Twitter, I don't believe in walls, and it's important that our countries are together. We should be friends and companions. So, there could be some of that motivation there, that he wants to go down and play in Mexico and have that experience of playing in Mexico in a very tense and difficult time within the relationship between the United States and many countries, Mexico included, because of the political climate down there. And I don't want to get into left-right crap right now, but we can recognize that there are tense times.
So what will be the result of this on the field for Leon? That's you know me, Duane. My mind always goes to, what's the repercussion on the field? What's the sporting aspect of this? And how does that affect Leon's chance of winning the Clausura? They won't. I don't think they will. And I don't think the Landon Donovan signing is going to change any of that. And I don't anticipate Landon to be a starter I do see him make a few apparitions. But you know what it reminds me of? Reminds me a bit of, okay, on a bigger scale, granted, in a way bigger league. But is it really different than Didier Drogba signing with the Phoenix Rising?
Yeah, I mean, there's something. I mean, in the sense that with Drogba, we always assume that there might be some kind of tie-in to a future MLS team if Phoenix were to get one. I think anyway, but
or just an ownership
so
stake of this with the Phoenix right now, and having a percentages probably of the gate. And when he plays, and more people have showed up, so it's kind of a win-win situation. It's kind of a way to sign a player on a smaller contract and get him a back end return at the end.
I think that where the similarities lie is that there's probably more than just soccer happening. You talk about what's going to happen from a scoreboard perspective, and who knows? Like, Landon Donovan's 35 now. That's not an old man by world standards, but by soccer standards, you're getting a little geriatric at 35, right? Especially if you're considering that he's a player that relied a lot on his speed and athleticism. That was a lot of Donovan's games, is that ability to sort of hit teams on the counter. His most famous goal was basically about his speed and ability to score off the transition. And can he still do that? Is he still going to be able to do that within a Mexican league, which can be quite quick and frantic at times, very fast and athletic and skilled league? I don't know. And I don't think we're going to know until we see him down there. But what I do know is this is going to generate a lot of attention, and going to generate a lot of attention for a club that is not one of the bigger ones in Mexico. It's not
able to, and I think they weren't ready for what was going to happen. And I think this was maybe put up together a bit at the last minute. And that would explain why the lack of readiness, if you would say, from Lyon's side to actually be able to handle this English demand, because there's no English TV partnership. You know what I mean? There are a lot of American players, or fans, of the soccer player that Landon Donovan are asking for ways to see this team, and it's going to be difficult. It's not the one that's shown on TV. So there's a lot of tangibles failure in the next few weeks to see how Lyon is going to handle this demand coming from the United States.
And I've dealt with Santos Laguna before for requests of Jorge Gomez back in the day, and it was a challenge because I have very limited Spanish. I can sort of fumble around a little bit when I travel in Latin areas, but by and large, I don't speak the language, and I certainly can't write it very well. So you're going through Google Translates and so on and so forth, and they're answering the phone in Spanish, and you're trying to get someone on the phone that can speak English or sort of have a Spanglish coming on down the line so that you can get it done. And it certainly was a challenge, and that was just me trying to get one interview. I can't even imagine how overwhelming it would be for a Spanish-speaking, unilingual Spanish speaker that's trying to now deal with a whole bunch of English calls. And Lyon, if you don't know, it's an interior. It's not a coastal team. It is a team in interior Mexico, about maybe an hour outside of Guadalajara, and about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from Mexico City. Like, it's kind of the middle of nowhere is not a kind way to put it, but it's not exactly where the tourists go, right? So this is going to be a lot of challenges for them, and hats off to Landon in this particular part of his career, because what he was criticized for a little bit earlier on is being sort of comfortable. He liked to be comfortable. He wasn't comfortable in Germany, so he went back to MLS, and a lot of people criticized him for that. This is going to be anything but comfortable. He is going into interior Mexico, a place, and he's a good Spanish speaker from what I know.
Yeah, well, I watched the video. I watched the video from last night. I did not understand one word, but I watched it. And he has a very a good pronunciation, I would say, a lot better than I. And, he speaks and I don't. So he speaks Spanish very well, and it was very eloquent. And a lot of fans, seem to draw a lot of attention. And this is probably the highest player, one of the highest profile player to play for Lyon too. So it's good for the club. The club is being talked about today more than probably ever before, at least north of the Mexico-United States border. And there's a lot of political talk too, because of the comments of the beliefs of the wall. So I think it's a win-win situation for now for everyone. But I think it's going to be different when it's actually about soccer.
Can I give a theory? I think he is making a bit of a statement, and not even to be negative about that. This is how he feels comfortable, I think, supporting Mexico and showing that he's, allied or allied with them and views them as friends. So, that's a worthwhile thing, and I'm not going to criticize him for that. If I'm going to take a nice, slightly more cynical interpretation and speculation here of what he might be motivated by, we know that Landon Donovan's done a little bit of media work in the United States on the MLS side, on the English side, and he's such a good Spanish speaker that I wonder maybe he looks at the future of soccer media in the United States and in Mexico and thinks, if I have some Mexican league experience and I can speak Spanish and get onto a Spanish-speaking broadcast, that might just open up more doors for him post-soccer career. I don't think this is going to be more than a very short little sprint for him here to finish his career in Mexico. It's just going to add to his resume when he wants to move into that media world. He could work in Mexico. He could work on Spanish language American broadcasts of Liga MX. And I think that's just another sort of way that you could look at this as maybe what's motivating him. That's speculation, but I don't think it's completely out to lunch when you think about what he has done post-soccer career. I can't see Landon Donovan ever coaching. I don't think that's his gig. I think he's more of a media personality. You called him maybe the best American player of all time. I would argue that he's the most popular American player of all time. I think that Claudio, a guy like Claudio Reyna maybe who's out there that might have a better argument for best of, but certainly Landon was the most popular and remains the most popular, especially now in the after recent events involving the U.S. men's national team. He is by far still the most popular U.S. soccer player
and the biggest star in the post-social media era. So that's something too, where we have a public consciousness that seems to stop at the advent of social media because we can't remember anything before, period. So maybe that's just me. Another topic, Duane, another topic that caught our attention in the last few days is Cal Larin popping up in Turkey with a Besiktas jersey and a medical and a controversy.
Yeah, it's well, we've seen this play out before. It wasn't involving a Canadian player, but it was involving a Canadian team. And Camilo, we're obviously talking about when he went to the Mexican side before he had completely been released from Major League Soccer. And, there was a lot of pushback there from MLS circles, and we're getting a little bit of it now. I have spoken to people close to Larin's camp in the days that have followed, and they're not even hiding the fact that they're doing this to push the agenda. This is a ploy by them to force an issue that they feel that they were promised. They feel that they were promised that he would be transferred to Europe after this conclusion of this season, because that was the point in which Orlando would get the maximum amount of allocation available to them. And now that it's dragging on and they're not getting this and they're halfway into this transfer window, they're sort of going, you know what, at this point in time, let's just put this out there. It's, a risky ploy, because what happens if MLS digs their heels in and Orlando digs their heels in and doesn't sell him, then he's suddenly alienated his own fan base a little bit. And what's that going to mean for him? And is Orlando going to want to play him because they're going to think that he's, not necessarily going to be happy? I don't think Orlando should want him either. They got Dwyer there, and they want to build around him. And they know that Lauren doesn't want to be.
They got Coleman, and they just signed yesterday. So, yeah, it's. I think it's a negotiation went wrong. Turned wrong. It's a conversation that escalated quickly earlier, last week.
This is, well, for the Lauren camp, I think that they've been frustrated all this year because they kind of were hopeful that they could move on last year at the start of the year. But then the way MLS rules work, they were kind of stuck with this idea that it didn't make financial sense for Orlando to move him. And I think that that's a ridiculous thing that MLS needs to look at, because the next stage, and I'm not the only person saying this by far, this is widely out there. The whole theory of MLS 3.0 is this is the time that it emerges into a league that now can sell young talent up to then, solidify its base more. And this is an evolution from where they were before, where they didn't have young players that were desired outside of their own thing. And that's being blunt. They weren't producing players that were good enough to allow them to sell on at any significant amount. Now they're still undervalued, but they can sell them on an amount that is going to allow MLS itself to sort of solidify its older base and continue to improve to the point that maybe in another 20 years or so, and that's the timelines we're thinking about here, they might be able to take that next step and become I think that they're probably a tier 3 league in the world right now, and there's probably about 5 tiers of leagues in the world, so they're kind of in the middle. They might be able to get to a tier 2 league in another 20 years if they can continue to do stuff like this. To get to a tier 1 league, we're gonna have to have a whole cultural shift that involves a lot more than just the soccer and the business behind it. So I'm not dismissing MLS or being negative about it when I call it a Tier 3 league. I just think that's realistic, and a Tier 3 league needs to move on players like this because they don't want to get stuck there. And if you don't move them on quick enough, then suddenly some of these young talents aren't going to come, and that's what you need to really factor in. Yes, you're losing an asset that you can market around, but do you want the next asset coming up? There's nothing wrong, I think, and I think soccer fans are savvy enough in North America, and I think MLS and the ownership of these teams need to realize that the fans are savvy enough, that we are worldly in our view of how we view the sport. The fact that we're attracted to the sport makes us worldly. We're not North American focused. We understand these things. It's not a risk. People are going to accept this. Orlando fans understand that Kyle Lauren wants to move to a bigger league and understands that they love MLS, they love Orlando City, but they understand it's not Besiktas. They're not as good. I think most Orlando fans get that, and there's nothing wrong with that. And they need to bite the bullet and get this done. And otherwise, we're going to have more of these kind of moves. Is it the right thing for Lauren Camp to do?
Is it the right way to do it? Probably not, but the right thing, kind of. Like, signing for Besiktas is the right thing. The way they're trying to push the agenda right now. Is it the right way? Depends on your perspective, but it's a way to accelerate the negotiation aspect of it.
Yeah, and we don't know everything that's going on. From what I'm hearing, that they're frustrated because they feel that the promises have been broken. And Orlando has fired back by suggesting that the Lauren Camp knew that this would happen and knew that they had control over that. And it's getting into like a he said kind of situation with that. So, who do you believe? My bias lies to Lauren's side of things. My bias always lies to the player side of things. I think MLS plays hardball with these contracts far too often, and I don't like that. But that's where my bias is. So judge for yourself based on where your theories and feelings are around this issue. But I think that the bottom line is that we need to get Kyle Lauren to Turkey. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some rumors, some things that are becoming more clear, and new players, maybe Canadian players, signing for the Montreal Impact.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee joined by Duane Rollins, as always. Duane, the more days are going, the more we hear player names and rumors, and sometimes it's more than rumors, sometimes it's negotiations, sometimes it's a flirting tactic between players and club. For the last week and a bit more on social media, Chris Mavinga and Montreal Impact fan are flirting with each other, saying, well, I'm interested, I could be interested, wink wink, oh, those colors are nice, and all those little flirtation between supporters and players, and maybe there's smoke to that fire.
Well, what the fire is that he doesn't like his current contract and wants to get a better contract. And this is sort of speaking to what we talked about before. He's a Toronto FC player right now, but they can't really give him a raise. And he's sort of, I think, being open with probably being a bit naive that we can't read French tweets here or something. But at any rate, that's kind of what's happening there. And there's also, some suggestion that maybe going back to Europe would be an option for him as well. And again, it comes down to this control thing and the ability to offer raises or pay or compensate players in the right way. Toronto FC got Mavinga pretty cheaply to help him. He basically, it was a win-win situation for the two sides. It sort of regenerated his career a little bit and allowed TFC to get sort of an undervalued asset that helped them be what they were last year, which we can now say, at the very least, the most successful Major League Soccer team of all time. In a single season, right? So this was part of that. Now, here we are, and we've already seen Steven Beitashour, which we haven't really talked about on the show yet, moving to LAFC. That hasn't been announced yet, but it's been reported by very trustworthy sources. So we assume that Beitashour is gone. If Mavinga leaves, then we're already sort of seeing TFC getting chopped down a notch, which is the nature of what happens in Major League Soccer. It is the ultimate tall poppy league. As soon as a team sticks its head above water, just by the nature of the rules and the cap and how they have to structure themselves, their head gets chopped off and they get pulled back down in the water with the rest. And look, if you're a fan of
sorry, Duane, it's also the aspect of players wanting to monetize the best season they had in their career. And if a player turns out that his contract is at the end of his contract, it's the end of his contract and you just won the treble, you want to monetize that situation. And it could be now or never for some of those players.
Sure, but MLS rules prevent even a rich owner like MLSE from doing that.
To retain all the players. True.
Yeah, if MLSE had the ability to pay Chris Mavinga another $500,000, they would. It's peanuts to them, right? So, but they can't because of the league and because of the parity controls that are there. And if you're a fan of parity, you're like, yes, so. But for those of us that are frustrated by that aspect of Major League Soccer and, sort of see this as training wheels, as I sometimes refer to it as, I get that it's hard for me to completely attack the idea of having caps and having some salary controls on this, because I recognize and I argue on this all the time with the people that are just purists, like, single entity done now, pro rel in now, all the people that have unrealistic expectations of where the league is. But I do think that the league is too conservative by half, and that there should be an ability, especially for their top teams, to maintain themselves. If they always talk a big game about winning the CCL one day, but they don't do anything to help those teams do it. TFC as the champions, and I'm not trying to ask for anything special because I'm from Toronto. If it was the LA Galaxy we're talking about, I would truly believe the same thing. If you want these teams to compete to win titles, you should be able to provide them with the ability to keep them together so that they can continue on into the Champions League as the unit that won the title, because that's to say, for the sake of argument, that Beitashour seems like he's gone. And I think that when you talk about Beitashour as alone and by himself, that there's an argument to be made that maybe it was the right time for those two sides to part. He's getting a little bit older. He had the injury problems last year. They have Hassel, who came in and did a good job. They can probably find a young outside back that can play the system well, that can step in and play Beitashour's role at an equal level, at a replacement level. But when you're talking about Mavinga, that's a guy that's going to be very difficult to replace. He was versatile. He was dynamic. He could play up the middle. He could play at the back. He could play in the center even. And he did a lot of things for that club last year and was a really important piece. And if they lose him, then there's no doubt that this club is weaker than it was on December 9th. And
I don't know if there's
going to go into it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I don't know. You're going into a CCL competition. How are you going to argue that you're going to weaken this team and have them win? To me, that there should be a better ability to provide raises to your current players, and this goes league-wide. There should be some kind of mechanism that allows owners, now that they're well off enough, to tap up their players. Maybe it comes out of their own pockets, something that allows you to maintain players in the markets that they're currently in, and I think that would benefit the league across the board, not just making the best teams stay good, but also allowing mid-teams to maintain players that matter to their community. And this is something that frustrates me about all salary cap leagues, this idea that players that, fans fall in love with these players, then for financial reasons that make sense from a cap perspective, you have to get rid of them. I don't think that builds a community, builds a connection between fans and teams in any real way. And I think it's cutting off your nose to spite your face when you're a sports league doing that.
True, yeah. And I'm wondering if the French aspect, the Chris Mavinga, Frenchman, Rémi Gall, new coach of the Montreal Impact, Frenchman as well. I'm wondering if there's that aspect, maybe that it's part of the equation too, and maybe Chris Mavinga sees the level of nothing to take from the level of the coaching staffs of Toronto FC at all. It's not to compare the two, but what Montreal's putting together in the coaching staff, Duane, the more and more I've looked, I've talked about it last week. I've had the pleasure to talk to a French journalist of the Journal Le Dauphiné, and he literally changed the way I knew that they hired a good staff, right? Because you see the resume, but it's more than that. It's Joël Batz was recognized at some point as the best goalkeeper coach on the face of the planet, and Robert Duverne was who is the strength and conditioning coach, we used to call them, or physical preparator, they're called now. Well, he was considered one of the best in the world too. So it's at that level of his coaching staff, and I'm wondering, as a Frenchman, Chris Mavinga, as a boy, when he was watching on TV his national team, the French national team, who was on that team on the coaching side? It was the Robert Duverne, the Joël Batz. So maybe there is something to that too, but we'll see if it happens. One thing that might happen, and it's closer to happening than maybe the Mavinga situation, is Canadian international Michael Petrasso maybe crossing the pond back home, at least in Montreal this time, maybe again.
Yeah, look, and that's a good move, I think, for Petrasso there. Whether or not he played at QPR, he had a decent run there at times, especially a little earlier on when he was younger. He was a pretty consistent performer at their youth levels and sort of their reserve sides, and he got some minutes up there at the top team as well. Not necessarily getting the same sort of playing time now that he would have liked then. This is a guy that I think that would be very much coming into Montreal, playing a role that maybe not quite the same exactly because there's an age difference there, but kind of at the same level as a Ricketts maybe in Toronto, which Ricketts is a valuable player in Toronto. This is not a dismissive thing or an invaluable thing at all for the Impact. But I don't think they're bringing him in as their first striker is what I'm getting at, especially since they have a lot of attacking talent there already. But as a guy that can come off the bench, as a guy that can provide a different look, as a guy that can pop the odd one in here and there, I think that he would be a useful sort of asset for the Impact to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish on the players, we'll take a small break after and come back and talk about maybe the needs of the Canadian team in Major League Soccer heading to the draft later this week. Tissot Nana Adekora signed with Ottawa, and Ottawa's bringing back some players. Maxime Tissot, I've talked about it a few weeks ago. He was open and he had done an interview with a journalist in his home region of Gatineau, saying, look, I'm still looking for a club, looking for MLS opportunities first, and then going down the pecking order, and who knows, I might be back in Ottawa if I don't find anything, not saying that he doesn't find anything else, but saying that there was an openness if things looked possible to maybe come back to Ottawa. And now it's official. Maxime Tissot will play for the Ottawa Fury in 2018, and Nana Adekora, after his stint like Maxime Tissot with the San Francisco Deltas last year, now back home, Canadian international for now playing for the Ottawa Fury in the nation's capital.
Yeah, I think these are moves that have a little bit of Canadian Premier League in mind too. Now that we know that there's a start date for this league, that you might see these players be more willing to come back to Canada, play for these USL sides in the hopes that they might be able to stick in. The Fury, there's worse places to play and live than Ottawa. You're a short little drive to Montreal if you want a little crazy nightlife. A little Ottawa, and the market does okay at times too. So it's a decent sized city. You can live pretty affordably there too, especially on the Gatineau side. It's not a bad little gig for these guys, and especially if you look at a guy like Nana, who I think understands where his level is and where his career is going right now. He might look at the opportunity to go back to the Fury, and when the Canadian Premier League launches in a year or so, I could see Nana Adekora being the centerpiece and wearing the armband for 4 or 5 years and being one of the guys that is up there and helping launch that league and doing something really historic. And Tissot would look at it as an opportunity, in an area which, as a French speaker, he's got a lot of that opportunity there, and it's a chance to revitalize his career a little bit. And if the Premier League is where he ends up, then great. If not, maybe he can move on or move up or move wherever. And yeah, good for them. I'm happy to see Nana, especially his career. I had a chance to get to know him a little bit back when I covered TFC as beat writer for that 1 year. He was on the team then. I spoke to him a few times. He was having some struggles right then. He's just a really nice guy. And, sometimes I think we lose touch of the human aspect of this. This is a decent human being that had some personal stuff that he had to work through back in the day that made his MLS time not as successful as it maybe could have been after the good start that he had. And he found himself in the NASL and found a home down there. And this is, I guess, the other side of if the NASL goes away. As much as a lot of us that sort of look at the political side of this and the TEDs of the world out there might rejoice at that. I saw jokes on Twitter the other day that some prominent soccer writer said that he was going to buy a cake the day the NASL folded, which said, F the NASL on it and eat the cake and be celebrated. Well, don't think about TED. Think about the players that have found homes down there and have found an ability to change their career around a little bit after being successful there. So, that's not rejoicing in the failing of those players or the loss of those players are going to face if that league does, in fact, go belly up.
Yeah, well, the Deltas went belly up, so that's just for Deltas, it's over anyways. To finish our Canadian segment, pretty much, our Canadian soccer segment for today, Mark Dos Santos officially now assistant to Bob Bradley in LAFC. We've talked about it a week and a half ago when there was rumblings about it, and when Mark Dos Santos literally tweeted, well, sometimes you think you're going north and you end up south, which makes sense because LA, it's kind of south and it's a lot warmer than where I am, at least.
It's not closer to home.
It's actually a little further than San Francisco West.
Yeah. I think it's a good move for him. I think that it's a good move for him. I think he should have been given an MLS opportunity as a head coach first, but I think the nature of his passport and the fact that MLS is reluctant to go outside of their old boys network, and there's no doubt about that when you look at the coaching hires, suggests that his best bet, his best hope to get a Major League Soccer head coaching position is to go under a guy like Bradley, who's going to open up all kinds of doors for him and is going to legitimize him in more ways than winning titles at D2 can. And that's maybe wrong, but it's also true. So I think this is the best move for Mark Dos Santos at this point in his career, is to get as a high-profile assistant in a high-profile market under the highest-profile manager you could possibly have. Bradley's not going anywhere soon. He's not there to take over LAFC's head coaching position. That's why Dos Santos is able to get an assistant position at this team, because he's not a threat to Bob Bradley, right? He'd be a threat to other head coaches. And one more of those positions opens up, probably not this year, but next year, then he's going to probably be front and center to get that position. This is a job. He's accepting this job with the idea that he's looking for that first opening of 2019 in Major League Soccer. And I think that's MDS's ultimate aspiration right now, is to lead a Major League Soccer team.
We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. It's the draft. It's the National Soccer Coaches Convention. I was going to say conference, but it's a convention. There's a few conferences in there, but it's a convention. It's in Philadelphia this week, and Duane, I just want to take a second, first of all, and congratulate Jonathan Tannenwald, which Saturday it was announced that he was elected the new president of the North American Soccer Reporters Association. It's not dead, and it's going to be back better than ever, I believe, with Jonathan Tannenwald at the helm. Congratulations, Jonathan.
And, paying our dues for that, which I think Kevin and I should probably both join that, is something that you can help us do.
Exactly. Patreon.com/sports podcasting network. I want to thank Sofiane, Dave CH, Justin, Don, Pierre, Sam, and so on and so forth. Your recent contribution makes a big difference, and we want to invite the listeners. You like our show? Share the show. You like the podcast? Share it. You liked it even more than that? Well, pledge. Take the deep dive. Take the leap of faith and help us stay independent. Help us continue to try, at least, to keep people accountable in this North American soccer world. We need independent voices, and without your help, we might not be able to stay independent. So with your help at patreon.com, that's patreon.com/sports podcasting network, we can stay independent.
And real quickly, if you can't afford a monthly donation, you could always look to do a one-time donation, or even to donate us something in kind. Equipment works. Talk to us, see what the needs are out there. If you have a jersey or something, like a signed jersey, a signed merchandise that you really is just collecting dust, maybe you could send that along to us, and we could include that as a prize for those that do donate to us, like as a raffle or something like that. There's lots of ways that you can help us out.
At the same time, you see the studio if you're watching us on YouTube. You think your team needs to be on this wall behind me? Well, send me that scarf, and I'll put it there. That's what it's there for. Like Bytown's boys right here, like 127 Montreal, and like the MLS Cup. And let's not forget the return of Pepito. Pepito here. Pepito, this is my Mexican luchador playing soccer. He fell off the shelf a few weeks ago. It kind of broke his leg. But I got Pepito back in order, and Pepito's here. But you got your mementos that you want to see in the studio. sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com for all the information.
Just real curious, Kevin, if I were to get you a Toronto FC MLS Cup champion scarf, would you hang that in your studio?
I guess I have to.
There you go.
Oh,
all right.
Now somebody's going to
so
send you one of those. You know, that's what's going to happen now. Somebody's going to yeah, here you go, Kev. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. There's my open thing to all the TFC listeners out there is to someone get Kevin a Toronto FC MLS Cup championship scarf, and he will.
A lot of players, which will end up being like 8 players that play in the league next year.
Oh, yeah. What we've done is maybe I'll just go through last year's first round a little bit to give you an idea. I'm in the middle of doing research on that. But anyway, what the impact can get out of this. And we talked about this a little bit with Travis on Friday. If you want to go back to listen to our Friday show, you can listen to Travis Clark of Top Drawer Soccer, who has a much greater understanding of the player pool of the college players that are out there, the prospects that are out there. He's the guy to listen to in terms of that. We're not going to delude ourselves here by talking about this player or that player, because I'm not at the combine and I don't watch NCAA soccer at a strong enough, high enough level. In fact, I don't think I watched a second of it this year, to be blunt with you, because I was a little bit distracted.
I was thinking, at least for me, like, I'm not watching, period. Never mind, like, some. So.
Yeah. Well, in the past, I usually would watch a little bit of the tournament because, you know, you could get them on their free streams and they were legal free streams. So why not? But yeah, no, there was playoffs going on and lots happening around the world of soccer at the time. So I just didn't get to it this year.
Plan of like either a trade or either a way to get the first round draft pick. I do the first overall draft pick. I don't know, but there is a plan in place for sure. And Duane, Miguel, and Joe Saputo were talking last Monday is, look, we have the 4th and 7th pick of the first round. It does leave us in a situation that we can maybe do something good, and there's a plan. We don't want to divulge our tactics too much, but we have a plan. So heading into the draft, knowing that LAFC listens right now to potential offers, and knowing that there is a lot of offers apparently for LAFC's first overall draft pick. Is Montreal one of them? It could be. But can you get an asset at a high value enough, like enough value to make it worthwhile? Or does a 4th and 7th round draft pick have enough value that it matters, right? If you mess up your trade and it turns out it's not a great trade, is that as bad or as even as drafting a college player, which might not even pan out to be a regular player for your team? You might not even sign him. Montreal Impact have a history of not even signing over 50% of their draft pick. So what's more valuable? That's when you've done that assessment, maybe like, okay, might as well just take the 4th and 7th, get a depth player that you, at least a bench player sometimes in the starting 11, depending on the calendar and the amount of games in a short time period. Maybe that's worth more than those 2 draft pick. So maybe there is a plan in place.
When I look at last year's real quick, you look at the top 5 picks, forget the whole first round, the top 5 picks of the draft last year. Dan Laddie of Minnesota picked him first overall, was the only player that played significant minutes in Major League Soccer last year. Miles Robinson didn't play for Atlanta. Jonathan Lewis had 11 appearances for NYCFC. Ambrosi had something like 7 appearances for Portland, I think. Hold on, let me just double check that one. And Braca, the Columbus guy, only had like 6 or 7 appearances. Ambrosi had 13 appearances, so I undersold him a little bit. But that's the type of stuff you're talking about. These are the top 5 picks of the draft, the very top guys, and they're barely playing. I do think that you have to look at the draft now with a very long view in mind, that these guys are probably going to play in USL. I mean, we'll make the joke that day, welcome to the USL draft, because that's basically what it is. You're looking at guys that are going to go down and going to make some significant times down there. The first overall pick last year happened to play some decent minutes on a terrible team. That whether he could do the same on a good team, who's to know? But I look at the Toronto FC released their first-round draft pick after a year in USL this year, right? So that there's just we talk about this. I don't want to belabor it. I feel like I'm bashing these guys for their chasing their dream when I do that sometimes. I just think you have to be realistic as a fan that you're not going to get much out of that.
It's just that we can't get behind the hype of, oh, look, it's a draft. It's the super draft. It's going to change everything. Your team's got the number one draft pick. It's not like that. It's not like the other top four leagues of sports in North America. This is not this NFL draft here. You're not going to get a player that's going to change the fortunes of your club. You're not. That player, you need to develop him. You need to find him and you need to develop him. That's how you do it.
What it is the CFL draft. I know we probably have a very small crossover.
That's the worst drafts of all because it's a phone call and there's names and those names never actually play in the league.
Well, some of them do. I mean, the CFL draft is useful for finding depth players, particularly Canadian offensive linemen. Like that's what it is, right? Like
guys from Laval and Montreal.
Or Saskatchewan or whatever,
True.
Big farm boys that could play in the line for $50,000. And look, they don't. The thing about the CFL, I'll give them credit for it. And part of this is because they're not the best marketers sometimes, so they haven't really probably thought of it. But they don't overhype it. It's their college draft, and they draft Canadian college players, and they don't make a big deal of it. And the only thing that is their universities, if they get drafted from it, will sort of give them a tweet or something. But other than that, we don't really go much. And I think MLS would be wise to go down that road. We assume that they're not going to because they are a marketing machine and they want to hype it up and they want to have that moment with the scarf. And I guess we shouldn't begrudge it too much to these kids for having that moment. But in many cases, that's the only moment they're going to have. That's going to be the literal high point of their professional soccer career is holding a scarf beside Don Garber. Yeah. Or if they're lucky, Don Garber, it might be
it might be somebody else. Yeah, it might be I don't know the name. It might be Dan Cortemash or
Yeah, that's usually Dan after the second round. But yeah,
that's it. That's
I don't think they get the scarves. But there's 23 damn picks now. When I first started to follow this, TFC was the 13th player in, the 13th team in the league, right? So they've expanded so fast that at least to be at least the first round, you kind of go, if you had a first round pick, well, at least you're going top 13. Now TFC it's basically a deep second round pick from back in the early drafts when we first started to watch this. Like, what does TFC expect to get out of this draft? A warm body, if they even do that.
A guy for the practice squad that plays against your first team.
Bruce Arena passed on a draft pick once. This is where we're at, and I think we're going to see more of that.
I don't know that story. What's that story?
Oh, yeah. It was 2 years ago, the last pick of the draft. The Galaxy just said, nah, we're good.
so, all right. Now on the clock, Bruce Arena and the LA Galaxy. Nah, I'm good. We're good. Move on.
They brought Popeyes in or something. Like they at the draft table because they had such low draft position, they just were eating chicken and hanging out on the draft floor. Like, not a word of a lie.
Some chicken.
They were there because they had to be.
And biscuits.
What was that? I'm here so I won't get fined. That's what was happening.
Yeah, I'm just here so I won't get fined. So, what do you think about this whole situation? I'm just here so I want chicken. Now I want some Popeyes chicken. What does Toronto or Vancouver need, Duane? All right, let's be blunt here. And again, no offense to the players being drafted this weekend. We wish you good luck. We wish you to have fun. Enjoy the camera time. You might need it because it might be the only one you ever get. And if not, prove us wrong. Prove me wrong. Go on the field, score a few goals, and say, that's for you, Kevin. I'll be like, yeah, man, good job. So, can Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto find any other needs in this draft?
Whitecaps are drafting 17th, TFC's drafting 23rd. Now, they can move up, obviously, and that's always something. This is what I'll say. If they get either the Impact could get something at 4. There might be a player that they can get between the two picks that could come in and have a significant role next year. That is not outside the realm of possibility. However, the Whitecaps and TFC at 17 and 23, they would need to either find a really rough-edged player, like someone that's fallen completely between the cracks, and they see something in it that others do that fits their system in a way, or they're going to get lucky. They're unlikely to find something at their current draft position that's going to help next year. They might be able to find something that they can build around. And I think TFC will approach it if they don't trade up. If there's a player that they're really high on in the college ranks, that's what they'll do. They will throw some TAM and some GAM at some team high up that they will then just switch positions, and then we're having a whole different conversation here. But let's assume that's not the case. I think TFC will approach this by picking a young player that's a bit of a project, and they will bring him to Lamport Stadium for the year and put him on TFC 2 and see whether there's something there that they can work with long term. If there is, they'll sign him to probably they'll extend him his USL contract, and we're talking about a guy that we won't see in the first team for 2 or 3 years. That's probably it's almost like a baseball draft, I think, for TFC at this particular cause. Like, when you draft someone in Major League Baseball, you're not expecting them for 5 or 6 years.
Duane, the baseball draft is so unimportant that it's actually during the season.
Yeah, well, it's a conference call again too, right? So it's important, but it's just not. It's not immediate. It's not current, right? Like it's for the future. Like people that follow prospects in Major League Baseball, they're not worrying about the players that are getting drafted. They're worrying about the players who have been drafted, what the system looks like, right? So that's a bit of a different setup.
Yeah,
but with the Whitecaps,
it's a transition. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's a transition from the old system of used to pick a college player and he comes into your team and he plays well and he's actually an asset right now, to now the MLS/USL draft where you're actually drafting for almost bodies to put in your USL/academy team.
No, I think that, for especially the richer teams, that's exactly what's going to happen. There are teams out there that are still going to, I think, look to find value in the college draft. But look, as the academies become more and more, and this is a broken record, we've said this 1,000 times. And to answer the question about, I think Toronto will probably draft an outside back. I truly believe that, because that's where they have the least depth in the system. And it's where they seem to try and build from the USL teams up to save some money outside. So I suspect that's what they'll do. They'll look to find a fast player, maybe a player that can play, midfield and fullback, something like that fits that three-man back if they continue to play that. That's what I expect will happen. Vancouver, look, they no longer have the Whitecaps too, which, if you're a Whitecaps fan, I'd be screaming at Bobby about that if I were you, because they like to talk a big game about their academy building, and yet they're going to cut money. So you figure that out, folks. Same deal, really, though. They're too low. 17's too low. Anything outside the top 5, and it's a crap shot. And again, I've done the numbers before. I'll do them again. I'll be done by Friday. It's not pretty after the top 5. It's really not. You're looking at maybe a 1 in 10 kind of scenario, where one time in 10 you're going to get a player that plays significant minutes in Major League Soccer for over 4 or 5 years, which means it's not impossible. So you are saying there's a chance. I'm saying there's a chance. I'm just saying the chances are very good in many cases.
Yep, absolutely. All right, that'll wrap it up for today. We will be back tomorrow, 10 a.m. as always, live on our YouTube page, which you can find. You can find links to every show we do, sportspodcastingnetwork.com. I've added a few things to the website, and now on the top right part of the website, if you go on the browser, you can listen to the latest Soccer Today. Always, the video is there, able to play. When you're browsing the rest of the site, you can still listen to Soccer Today live there as well. So on the homepage, the right side on the browser, you have the live show always. So that's spread to the website. You can subscribe to our shows on iTunes, Apple Podcasts. Leave a review, like the show, talk about it, spread the good news. Spread the Soccer Today news. There's a show that you don't like. There's an article that you think we've talked and we got it wrong. Tell us. Talk about it. Share it. Do whatever you like. The more we talk about it, the more it helps us to get more of you guys. We love to talk to you guys, and we actually want to have more of you guys aboard this Soccer Today hype train. And until tomorrow, as always, for Duane Rollins, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, and myself at Kev Laramee. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.